I ran into my old best friend after a decade and discovered why he really cut me off. Mark's life was built on code, caffeine, and quiet confidence. He was the CEO of Novatech, his second successful venture. Life was orderly, successful, and stable. Then he saw David. A decade had passed since his best friend had simply vanished. Now, David was sitting across the street in a worn-out coffee shop booth, looking desperate, aged by something heavier than time. Mark felt the old, deep wound ache again, the abandonment that almost crushed him years ago. Yet, a reckless need for closure pushed him forward. He offered David a job, a low-level analyst role, far below David's capabilities, but enough to keep him close. Mark told himself it was loyalty. It was actually a subconscious need to know why. David accepted quickly, too quickly. In the office, the red flags began to appear. David was jittery, too interested in Mark's executive calendar, and kept asking for access permissions he didn't need. Mark started keeping late hours. He noticed David always seemed to linger near Mark's private server room just before he left for the day. One night, Mark ran a deep background check, a relic from his suspicious days after losing his first startup. He didn't check David's personal life. He checked the company that had swallowed his first venture 10 years ago. There, buried in the acquisition team's internal payroll records, was David's name. A 2-month contract, ending exactly 1 week before David had disappeared from Mark's life. The discovery was devastating. It wasn't random abandonment. It was a planned, calculated removal. The knot of old pain twisted into visceral, cold anger. Mark realized David wasn't just working for him. David was working against him. He confronted David quietly in his office, not with emotion, but with the cold, hard printout of the payroll record. The forced composure in David's face finally broke. David confessed the initial betrayal. The rival CEO, Elias Vance, had targeted Mark's first startup and needed to isolate him emotionally before the acquisition. David was ordered to sever all ties, but the betrayal had layers. David then revealed the cold shoulder wasn't just a painful memory, it was a continuous threat. Elias Vance was still pulling the string. David hadn't come back seeking reconciliation. He was an operative, sent by Vance to infiltrate Novatech, gather data, and ensure the company's sabotage before Vance moved in for the final, cut-rate acquisition. David broke down, admitting Vance was his father. This was the false bottom twist. The decade of silence wasn't just malice, it was a twisted, protective measure. Elias Vance had sworn to destroy Mark's life, not just his business, if David ever contacted him again. David's silence was his sacrifice to keep his former friend safe. The emotional toll was immense. Mark felt the agonizing shift from betrayed friend to reluctant co-conspirator. The enemy was no longer just the CEO. It was the venomous control he had over his own son. Mark agreed to protect David, but only if David cooperated completely. The tables were turning. The infiltration would continue, but the target was shifting to Elias Vance. The plan was simple, clever, and built on irony. David, as the trusted infiltrator, had all the high-level access Mark needed.